Shiki is a shy rich nerd who has never had the courage to talk to a baddie in his life, just like you. However, everything changes when he relocates to a village where the broke local baddie sees him as a cash cow and wants to milk. It all started when Shiki finally arrived at the village on a premium Uber ride, and upon stepping out, he felt relieved that the village wasn't as crowded and life-suffocating as the big city. However, that was the moment he realized the cold in the village surpassed even the North Pole tucked inside a freezer. At that instant, it dawned on him that relocating during winter had been a brain-dead idea worthy of a smack. Feeling somewhat lost, Shiki pulled out his phone attempting to use Google Maps to navigate to his grandma's crib, only to discover that his phone had become colder than your ex's heart after she blocked you for being useless. Meanwhile, still disoriented and confused, Shiki fortunately spotted a pretty blonde village girl and noticed that, despite the cold, her hot legs were boldly exposed while he remained bundled up tighter than a mental patient in a straitjacket. The girl, Manami, caught him staring at her like some basement serial criminal. But before she could call the cops, Shiki approached her, explaining that he was lost and needed help reaching the location on his phone. Consequently, Manami guided him on the right path, and Shiki, too nervous to flirt or strike up a conversation, immediately started heading in the direction like a headless chicken without thinking. Nevertheless, Manami halted him and warned that trekking to the destination on foot would take 3 hours, adding that the snow might even turn his kidneys and lungs into popsicles before he got there. Upon hearing this, Shiki grew frustrated, regretting that he'd ditched the Uber too early. Shiki then inquired if he could order another Uber, but Manami replied that finding another Uber there was just as impossible as some of the viewers ever getting laid. Noticing his irritation, Manami then suggested he join her to wait for the bus, explaining it would take him to his location. Curious, Manami asked where he was from, and Shiki shared that he'd recently relocated from Tokyo. Suddenly, the girl's excitement spiked upon learning Shiki was one of them city boys, though Manami lamented that Shiki must view her as some dull village chick compared to the glamorous Instagram thoughts in the big city. Shiki quickly countered that this wasn't true, surprising her, though Shiki refrained from admitting that back in Tokyo, he'd been a socially crippled creep who'd never even seen the color of a girl's undies. Finally, the bus rolled up, but the donkey missed it because he was too busy drooling over Manami's attention. The next day, Shiki was introduced to the class as the new transfer student, and as he took his seat at the back of the class like all losers do, his thoughts lingered on Manami's hot legs, and he wished he could see her again. Just then, the plot gods intervened. Manami strolled into this classroom, equally shocked and thrilled to see they were classmates. Later, during the mathematics lesson, Shiki shivered from the cold, nearly turning into an ice fish, but Manami, noticing his plight, offered her blanket to warm him. Shiki gratefully accepted it. But just then, the thirsty degenerate used it to cover his pickle region, indulging in a discreet hand party while fantasizing about Manami on her knees and felt alive for the first time in years. After school that day, Shiki returned the blanket to Manami and thanked her, but when Manami sniffed the blanket, she commented on how she could perceive the filthy stench of a guy who just finished busting a nut. Shortly afterward, Shiki walked Manami home as a way to thank her properly for the blanket, and throughout the walk to the train station, Manami clung to him like a depraved dog. On getting to the train station, Manami suddenly invited Shiki to her home the next day since there was no school, shocking Shiki senseless. The next day, Shiki got to Manami's crib dressed in the same jacket, but was nervous as hell because this was the very first time he would be entering a girl's home. He rang the smart alarm, and on getting inside, he found Manami, who welcomed him to her home but informed him that they were all alone as her parents were not around, causing Shiki to freak out. She led him to the living room. Shiki took off his jacket and sat on the floor, but got creeped out when Manami got freaky like some foot fetish psycho, making him squirm harder than a worm on a hook. Manami then moved to the fridge and offered Shiki her cream. Shiki took a sip of the creamy milk and commented on how it tasted like yogurt. But just then, he was alarmed when Manami screamed and revealed that she had accidentally splattered the milk all over her milk source. Manami mentioned she was going to change her soiled clothes, but when she returned, she was now donned in her spicy skimpy nightwear that would make a monk renounce his vows. Shiki's brain somersaulted as he stared, so he suggested they Netflix and chill. Manami immediately agreed, and while setting up the Netflix, her sweet cheeks got exposed through her short, but Shiki quickly held his joystick in position to prevent it from connecting. During the movie, Shiki realized that Manami had dozed off like a bonehead, so he put on his Aladdin cap and was about to leave when Manami abruptly woke up, handed him his jacket that he had initially used to cover her up, and then apologized for sleeping off like a drunk sloth. Shiki collected his jacket, thanked her for inviting him to her home, and dipped. However, at that moment, this chick chased after him into the cold in her lingerie and apologized again for falling asleep. However, before she could explain further, Shiki pulled some next-level charmer move by wrapping his scarf around her neck like some Riz god, explaining that he didn't want her to catch a cold, leaving Manami blushing hard. The following day, while strolling along the corridor, Manami bumped into Shiki. She leaned close, whispering into his ears sussily, causing Shiki to freak out. Upon closer inspection, Manami realized Shiki was eyeing a poster for the upcoming winter festival, so she immediately assumed he must be attending the festival and offered to be his +1 to the festival. So on the day of the festival, Shiki received a text message from Manami informing him that she would be waiting for him at the train station. Manami also sent a one-time view thirsty trap emoji, and when Shiki clicked it, it drained his soul faster than a TikTok binge. When Shiki finally got to the train station, he met Manami dressed like some low-budget Lady Gaga with her heavy milk jugs bouncing more freely than usual. Shiki immediately froze, but he tried to retain his composure and not to look like some creep. They arrived at the festival, and upon seeing the icy statues and people having the best time of their lives, Shiki was impressed that he got to see such amazing things even in a small village. They explored the festival together like they were an item, took selfies together, and even had lunch together. However, while they had lunch, Manami asked to have a bite of Shiki's corn dog. Manami opened her mouth wide like she was about to receive his egg white, sending Shiki into panic mode. Although Shiki struggled, but he finally managed to shove the corn dog in her mouth without passing out. Following this, they had fun in the festival, building a mini snowman and taking a slide down the snowy slide. After the eventful activities, Shiki admitted that he had fun and then remarked that even in Tokyo, he didn't have such fun. He thanked Manami for accompanying him to the festival, which excited her. Manami then confessed that the last time she attended the festival was when she was young, and had never expected to have a blast attending the festival, even as a grown woman. Manami confessed to Shiki that she was at first worried that a city slicker like him would be disappointed since it was nothing compared to the big city, but she was glad he liked it. But mid-ramble, Manami slips, nearly face-planting into the snow, but Shiki channels his inner Spider-Man and snatches her out of the air before she eats dirt. The next day at school, during lunchtime, Manami suddenly popped out of nowhere and suggested they had lunch together. With no choice, the simp agreed instantly, and Manami brought out her packaged noodles. Shiki was surprised that Manami added hot water to the noodles. When she was done making her abomination, she forced the noodles into Shiki's face hole, and when Shiki demanded to know why she did that, Manami explained she was just reciprocating his kind gesture when he fed her his meat. Manami excitedly asked to see what Shiki brought for lunch, and when he showed her his IG-worthy post-cuisine, Manami was mesmerized at how rich and Gordon Ramsay-worthy it looked. She asked to take a pic for the gram and then chows down on his chopped meat. After having lunch together, Shiki confessed that it was his first time tasting cooked noodles, which surprised Manami. Manami immediately declared that he must be one of those spoiled rich kids from the big city, but Shiki downplayed it by explaining that his family was not rich at all. To prove that she was right, Manami suggested that she visit his shank later that day, to which Shiki agreed. Later that afternoon, as Shiki and Manami trekked to his Shiki's crib, Shiki nervously kept wondering how he would introduce Manami to his strict grandma. On the way, Manami found a snow fort built by some brats and forced Shiki inside. The snow fort was so tight that Shiki decided to pull out. On getting outside the fort, Shiki suddenly found his grandma, who was shockingly wondering what the freak was doing inside the glorified igloo. Alarmed, Shiki tried stammering an explanation before Manami arrived from the hole and grabbed his hand, making it look like they were jamming in there. Shortly, Shiki introduced Manami to his toothless granny, who instantly pegs Manami as a gold-digging floozy and shuts it down, saying they got plans and they have to leave. On the way, Shiki's pissed his granny's already team anti-Manami, but then Manami sprints up, going full Stepford wife, telling Granny to ditch the umbrella in the snow and helping with her bags like she's auditioning for daughter-in-law of the year. She also showed them a shortcut home, which clearly impressed the saggy old woman, so the geezer invited Manami to their home for a cup of tea. While watching Shiki and Manami goof around in the house, the old woman was surprised because the last time she had seen Shiki laugh so hard was when he was just a young boy. The following week, as the bus rumbled toward the snow mountain for skiing practice, Manami teased Shiki, calling him a scared sissy who couldn't ski. Manami bragged that she'd been skiing since she was in diapers and had mastered it. Shiki attempted to explain that snow barely fell in Tokyo, but he noticed Manami had zoned out, staring oddly at the girl seated next to him. Manami then tried chatting with the girl, Sarui, but was ignored like a filthy toilet brush. Shiki, puzzled by the thick tension between them, asked Manami if something was off. Manami confessed she'd been desperate for years to befriend Inoki, but the girl kept ignoring like she had a terrible body odor. Doubling down, Manami added she loved nothing more than to be besties with Sarui, whose Instagram model face and killer fashion sense she adored. Upon arriving at the snowy mountain for skiing class, Shiki and Inoki were separated from the others since they couldn't ski. The teacher directed Shiki to pair up with Inoki so they could learn together. Seizing the chance, Shiki decided to help Manami win Inoki over. Yet just as he opened his mouth, Inoki popped in her earbuds to block out his 8 voice. While Shiki and Sarui struggled to ski, Manami came showing off her moves like a pro, surprising Shiki, who whispered to himself how cool Manami was. Noticing Shiki was carried away, Akino became kinda jealous and asked if he had a thing for Manami, but Shiki, embarrassed, denied it. Akino explained that Manami had always been the perfect popular girl in school, unlike her, who reeked of boredom and loneliness. During a brief lunch, Shiki opted not to have his lunch inside the bus because he was shy about eating next to Sarui, so he moved to the lounge close by. But suddenly, the forgetful goat forgot to take his chopstick and was forced to return back to the bus to get it, and that was when he accidentally bumped into Sayuri taking off her clothes. At that moment, Shiki froze, covered his eyes like a true protagonist not to get cultured, and tried to leave. But Sayuri unexpectedly grabbed his hand and asked him to stay. While eating with Sayuri, Sayuri explained that she had a problem with sweating, and that was why she had always avoided any kind of sport, not to embarrass herself. Furthermore, Sarui clarified that because of her sweaty problem, she had avoided everyone and had no friends but had chosen to talk to Shiki because he was a new guy. Just then, a notification buzzed from Sayuri's backpack. When she stared at it awkwardly, Shiki asked if she'd check it, startling her. Left with no choice, Sayuri pulled out her Nintendo handheld. Intrigued, Shiki asked if it was a tablet, shocking Sayuri that he knew nothing about gaming. So excited, Sayuri decided to teach Shiki how to play some games, and they ended up bonding. Sayuri complained that she didn't want anyone to know she was a gamer because it was dumb and for losers. But Shiki countered that he found it pretty cool, and he also found her personality great, which touched Sayuri, making her flustered. Later, as they geared up for one last ski run, Shiki proposed a bet. If he made it down without stumbling, Sayuri would try talking to Manami. He added that Manami had always wanted her friendship and hoped they could all hang out together, to which Sayuri agreed. With that, they hit the slope, Shiki nailing it to the bottom. However, Sayuri couldn't brake in time and nearly crashed, only for Manami to swoop in and show her how to stop safely. Grateful, Sayuri thanked her for the save and apologized for being so distant all this time. Manami accepted it warmly, and they finally became friends. The next day, there was a terrible blizzard outside, and Shiki thought it best not to go to school, but his grandma told him trudging through the harsh weather was how he would prove he had balls. So to prove he was indeed an alpha male, Shiki dove right into the blizzard and started walking to school. But he almost met his ancestors that day if not for Manami, who rolled up in a car like his princess in shining chest armor and asked him to get in. While driving to school, Shiki met Manami's smoking MILF of a mom and nearly choked because their genes were so identical they could have been twins who aged differently. Manami then also introduced Shiki to her mamas, the rich dude that lived in a mansion. On hearing this, the woman activated her cougar ways and immediately informed Manami that it was high time she got a new stepdad. Manami's mom asked Shiki if he had a girlfriend back in Tokyo, which made Shiki quite embarrassed. Playfully, Manami started to tickle Shiki, but Shiki told her that his body was sore because of the skiing lessons the day before. So Manami apologized for manhandling his scrawny backside. Shiki responded to Manami's mom's question by admitting he was single, so the mom playfully asked if he was blind like a bat that he couldn't see that her daughter was ripe to be harvested. Manami turned red in embarrassment and asked her mom not to be so forward. Shiki, being a clueless lad, the bad boy at heart, loudly pointed out that since they were both hot, he wouldn't mind running a steamy threesome, leaving them blushing harder than they wanted his deed to pound them. When they finally arrived at school, Shiki thanked Manami's mom for the ride and then alighted. Later that day in class, Manami noticed that Shiki was rocking a cardigan and a blanket, to which Shiki informed her that he felt bad borrowing hers all the time. Manami replied that she was fine with it and then flashed her chesty assets like a stripper to show Shiki that she got warmers on. Shiki's hormones immediately went into overdrive, but he quickly took his eyes away and whined that he didn't have any warmers. So Manami handed some of her sticky warmers to him to use. Mid-conversation, Sarui walked in holding her Nintendo console, and on seeing it, Shiki mentioned that he would love to play with her. Shiki also informed Manami that Sarui was his hot professor teaching him everything about gaming. So not to be left alone, Manami became interested and asked to also be tutored by Sarui. Sarui then suggested they meet at the mall that day to commence the gaming lesson. After school that day, the team arrived at the mall. Manami got to play games with Sarui's handheld and was excited to clear the level on her first try. When Shiki excused himself to the male restroom, Manami suggested to Sarui that they purchase some cosmetics at the mall. But Sarui, being as broke as your dad, couldn't even afford a lip balm, so Manami offered to purchase the beauty items and they could share. Touched by the remark, Sarui thanked Manami. Sarui also called her a nice girl, causing Manami to blush, and then apologized for acting all grouchy at school. Manami accepted the apology like a saint and then told her she didn't need to bother with one. Shiki returned from attending to Mother Nature Call and then joined the girls in the cosmetics shopping spree. Later that night at home, Shiki tackled his English homework, but his brain cells were on vacation, so he decided to text Manami for help. Manami instantly replied, saying she was having her bath, then sent a thirst trap pic to prove she was indeed taking a bath that exploded Shiki's brain and nutsack. Not stopping there, Manami decided to make a video call with no plot armor on just to torment the poor lad even more. Before long, Manami turned the karaoke club into her personal Beyoncé concert, leaving everyone's jaws on the floor. Shiki and Sayuri were amazed because they thought Manami's talent stopped at makeup and cosmetics and never thought she got the vocals that could sing. Manami revealed that she could sing the song so well because it was her favorite song that always cheered her up. After the karaoke, the squad, along with a few other students, decided to grab a bite. As they enjoyed their meal, Manami suddenly lit up with excitement and reminded everyone that Valentine's Day was just around the corner. The mere mention of it sent Shiki's thoughts spiraling. He found himself wondering if Manami had any plans to gift a special someone some chocolates. However, before he could dwell too long, Manami happily announced that she'd be making tons of chocolates for all her friends, no romantic strings attached. This revelation, however, didn't sit well with Sayuri. Deep down, she had secretly been hoping to give Shiki a Valentine's chocolate herself. So when a random girl casually asked if she had anyone in mind to gift chocolates to, she panicked and blurted out a lie, claiming she'd rather save her money for her nerdy hobbies. The boys asked Shiki if he had ever received chocolate from a girl when he was in the big city, to which Shiki replied that the only chocolate he received was from his family. So they teased him for being a lonely, worthless V-card holder. After the get-together, the team headed home, but on the way, Sayuri pulled out her phone and couldn't stop thinking about getting Shiki some chocolates for Valentine. Even while playing games at home over the weekend, Sayuri couldn't shake off the idea and thought about what kind of chocolate she would give Shiki, but she tried to distract herself. Eventually, she caved and made a trip to the mall to buy chocolates. But just as she reached for a box, she unexpectedly bumped into none other than Manami. Manami revealed that she came to the mall to get the ingredients for the chocolate she planned on making, and then asked what Sayuri was doing in the mall. Nervous, Sayuri lied, stammering that she came to buy nail polish, but then quickly changed that she came to buy some cosmetics. Desperate to avoid suspicion, she dragged Manami into helping her pick out some beauty products. After cosmetics shopping, Manami bid Sayuri goodbye and was about leaving to get chocolate ingredients, but Sayuri shyly asked to accompany her, claiming it was because she wanted to make chocolate for Manami. As they exited the mall, Sayuri nervously asked if Manami had ever considered making special chocolates just for Shiki instead of general ones for everyone. Manami became tensed and demanded to know why Sayuri would even suggest such a thing. Sayuri, slightly flustered, explained that it was simply because Manami and Shiki got along so well, but Manami, still defensive, brushed it off, insisting that she and Shiki were just friends with no hidden feelings whatsoever. Yet deep down, she knew she wasn't being entirely honest with herself. That night, Manami texted Sayuri, letting her know she was about to start making her chocolates. Taking this as an opportunity, Sayuri asked for help with hers, and Manami, being the expert, gave her detailed instructions on how to craft delicious chocolates. However, as they chatted about Shiki during the lesson, Manami got too distracted and ended up spilling ingredients all over her cake, utterly ruining it. So the following day, with no homemade chocolates to give, Manami had to share a package of chocolate she had bought from the supermarket for every one of her friends. However, one ugly, ungrateful idiot, upon receiving the package of chocolate, complained bitterly about not receiving homemade chocolate. So Sayuro had to follow the ingrate outside of the class and warned him never to be ungrateful to Manami again or risk losing his carrot, scaring the heck out of the dude. Later, while cleaning the music room, Sayuri finally reached her breaking point. Overwhelmed with frustration, she broke down in tears and confided in Shiki. She admitted how crushed she felt about her chocolates being ruined, especially since she had really wanted Shiki to taste something she made herself. Wanting to cheer her up, Shiki decided to channel his inner Beethoven. Sitting at the piano, he played the same song she had performed at karaoke. And just like magic, the melody lifted her spirits. At that moment, Manami, who had overheard everything, entered the room and handed Manami the chocolate she had made using her guidance. Just when Shiki thought he wasn't receiving any chocolate, Sayuri gave him chocolate and claimed it was because he was her disciple, making him really excited. Sayuri also commended his piano skills, and together they all enjoyed the chocolate fest. The following week in class, the teacher announced that the final exam was fast approaching and urged the students to do their best. Shiki was cocky in his ability because he had already gone through all the subjects for the exams. But Manami was devastated because instead of cracking a book, the Gen Z baddie had wasted her time watching makeup tutorials on YouTube. So desperate to catch up, she begged Shiki to have a study party at her place, to which Shiki reluctantly nodded in agreement. After school that day, Manami dragged Sayuri into the study party and together they headed for her crib. Upon getting to Manami's apartment, Manami casually mentioned that her parents were at work and her little sister was at dance class. Sayuri was shocked to hear that Manami had a little sister because she had never imagined Manami as the big sister type, considering she had the IQ of an overgrown jit. Manami got offended at the shade but brushed it off and told them to chill in her room while she grabbed drinks. With that, Sayuri and Shiki made their way upstairs, heading for the room, even though Sayuri couldn't help but grumble about how Manami expected them to magically find her room despite them having never been to her house before. However, Shiki revealed that he had been to Manami's house before, shocking Sayuri. But he immediately tried explaining that they stayed in the living room watching movies and never did set foot into her plot arena. Even so, Sayuri assumed he was capping all the way and called him a sneaky perv. On entering Manami's room, they were shocked the place looked like Barbie vomited inside. This was the first time Shiki had ever entered a girl's room, so his cultured imagination refused keeping PG by picturing Manami stripping down to her plot armor. But sensing Shiki had spaced out, Sayuri gave him a death stare and called him a disgusting, nasty dog. Just then, Manami joined them in the room with drinks, and after taking several sips of her grape juice, they decided to dive right into quizzing themselves. It wasn't until nightfall that Shiki finally checked the time, only to realize he was well past his curfew and his grandma would skin him alive. Panic set in. Scrambling out of Manami's room, he hastily tied his sneakers and rushed toward the door. But just as he reached for the doorknob, the door suddenly swung open. Caught off guard, the lucky bastard lost his balance and landed face first into Manami's mom's heavenly pillows. Manami's mom brushed off the incident and decided to drive Shiki home, and on the way, she thanked him for lifting Manami's spirit during Valentine's and for playing the piano for her. By the time Shiki got home, his grandma was already radiating a murderous aura, visibly fuming over the fact that he had returned so late. After giving Shiki a stern warning the night before never to return home late, the grandma handed a bag of trash to Shiki, instructing him to dispose of it on his way to school the following morning. Shiki got to where he would dispose of the trash, and surprisingly found a smoking hot chick holding a stick and poking at some crows awkwardly like a certified nutcase. Shiki immediately tried to dip, but the simp in him couldn't help but drool over her beauty. Still, he couldn't wrap his head around what the girl was doing so close to literal garbage. Later that day at school, Manami informed Shiki that the pretty girl he ran into was none other than Rena, the white pink-haired beauty who had won the school's beauty contest 2 years in a row and her role model. She was fangirling. Switching topics, Manami then asked Shiki if they would be studying at her house again that evening. However, Shiki, still traumatized from his grandma's wrath the night before, quickly declined. Not wanting to admit the real reason, Shiki simply said he preferred to study solo. Manami, though visibly disappointed, claimed it was fine. She would just study with Sayuri instead. But Sayuri arrived almost immediately and turned her down as well. While studying at the library later that day, Shiki spotted Rena dozing off at her desk and couldn't help but stare like a useless simp. Rena caught him staring like some lost puppy, approached him, complimented him on how nice his posture was, and then casually pointed out that the answers marked in his textbook were actually incorrect. Shiki got home that evening, and his grandma, still pissed at his lateness, pointed out that since he relocated to the village from Tokyo, he had clearly dropped his guard and turned into Casanova. She suggested a tea ritual to purge unholy desires. But just then, the doorbell rang, and as Shiki opened the door, he was surprised to see none other than Rena, who revealed that she lived in the neighborhood and was distributing neighborhood bulletins. However, the moment she laid eyes on Shiki's samurai jack outfit, she lost her damn mind and impulsively hugged him out of nowhere. Unfortunately for Shiki, his grandma chose that exact moment to walk in on the scene and was pissed. The old woman declared that the tea ritual was no longer necessary because, at this point, Shiki had fully evolved into a full-blown simp with no cure. Then she angrily announced that if Shiki didn't make it into the top 10 in the upcoming exams, she would have no choice but to send his lovesick self straight back to Tokyo. A few days later, Rena approached Shiki on his way to school and, noticing his gloomy expression, immediately apologized for causing him trouble with the stunt she pulled at his house. However, Shiki reassured her that there was no need to apologize and admitted that his sour mood was actually due to struggling with his studies. Rena explained that the reason she had hugged him out of the blue was because she had a thing for Japanese clothes, and she couldn't help herself when she saw him wearing the kimono. Wanting to make it up to him, Rena then offered to tutor him for the upcoming exams. However, Shiki mentioned that pretty chicks that looked as hot as her were usually dummies. However, to prove she was all beauty and brains, Rena informed Shiki that she had always held the top spot in the school ranking since the day she enrolled. She then promised to teach Shiki past trends and strategies for the different subjects that would help him ace the exam. Hearing all this, Shiki knew Rena was just the cheat code he needed to snag a spot in the top 10, so he begged her to be his tutor. Rena agreed and then instructed Shiki to meet her in the library storage room after class each day for the tutorial. Shiki was fine with it but couldn't stop being nervous about being locked up alone with a bombshell in a confined room. Later that morning, Shiki and Rena arrived at school together, and on seeing them, Manami immediately got jealous. She approached Shiki and lamented how she had always wanted to be friends with Rena. However, Shiki explained that he recently got to know that Rena was his next-door neighbor. After class that day, Manami once again asked Shiki if he would study with her. However, Shiki, remembering his grandma's terrifying threat to send him back to Tokyo if he didn't rank in the top 10, turned her down on the spot. When it was time for the tutorials with Rena, Shiki headed for the library storage room, and the tutorial commenced immediately. At the end of the tutorial, Rena demanded to know why Shiki was studying so hard. Shiki, embarrassed, replied, saying there were some people he might never see again if he failed. In response, Rena mentioned that she would appreciate a reward for helping. She requested they go on a date if Shiki finally reached the rank of the top 10, leaving Shiki speechless. During one of Shiki's visits to the library room, Manami spotted him and decided to trail him, but lost him immediately after he entered the library. So the next day in class, Manami confronted Shiki, informing him that she had seen him heading to the library and tried to catch up with him so they could study together, but Shiki denied it faster than my dad left me. A week later, the exam results were out. Nearly in tears, Manami grumbled to Sayuri about failing miserably. On the other hand, Sayuri, though not thrilled, revealed that she had scored 72 out of 176, while Manami admitted her tragic 148 out of 176. At the same time, Shiki in the library storage room happily informed Rena that he got third place and then thanked her for tutoring him. During the weekend, Shiki, staying true to his word, dressed in traditional wear to take Rena out on their promised date. Shortly, Rena arrived dressed in a beautiful pink kimono that captivated Shiki, and together, they roamed the snowy street, looking every bit like a couple in almost matching outfits. Manami's mom, while driving to the grocery store, sighted Shiki and Rena on the date and didn't waste any time informing Manami about it. While Shiki and Rena were on the date, Manami and Sayuri spied on them to confirm if they were truly on a date. Sayuri couldn't shake off an odd feeling about the situation, but Manami, on the other hand, was solely focused on the chance to see her role model, Rena, up close. Meanwhile, Shiki and Rena visited the Crane Game shop, and on seeing all the cute local mascots in there, Rena was completely captivated. Shiki, trying to prove he is a signal male, confidently offered to get one of the mascots for her. However, when he tried, he fumbled, which only got Sayuri, the resident gamer, really pissed and wished she had such an opportunity to showcase her skills. After several failed attempts, Shiki was finally able to snag a tiny mascot the size of his PP and offered it to Rena. Rena gladly accepted it since size obviously didn't really matter to her, and then promised to take care of the tiny mascot forever. From their hiding spot, Manami observed how kind Shiki was, always willing to go the extra mile for others. Lost in her thoughts, she quietly muttered how much she wished she could be like him. However, realizing Sayuri was standing right next to her, she panicked and tried to cover up her slip of the tongue. Ironically, Sayuri was too busy dominating the crane game and securing a whole army of mascots for herself to even notice. As the date continued, Shiki and Rena decided to catch a movie about a woman struggling to prove herself and live up to others' expectations. Halfway through the film, Shiki noticed tears rolling down Rena's cheeks, so after the movie, they sat down to talk about it. Curious, Shiki asked if Rena was always this much of a crybaby. Rena argued that she rarely cried, but this film hit differently because she resonated deeply with the protagonist's struggles. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Rena opened up about how, despite all her hard work and top grades, she never really received praise from anyone. Shiki immediately chimed in, saying it was the same for him, and then confessed that he ran away from home after he had a serious fight with his parents. Rena pointed out that even though she rarely felt people understood her, she was glad to have met Shiki. Rena then asked Shiki if he had a girlfriend. Shiki froze for a second before replying that he was maidenless. Rena asked Shiki if he ever felt lonely, considering he was new in the village and didn't have many friends. Shiki, however, confidently replied that he had made some truly special friends who accepted him for who he was, so loneliness was never an issue. Just as the conversation was getting deep, Manami and Sayuri dramatically burst onto the scene. Shiki, utterly flabbergasted, demanded to know if they had been eavesdropping the entire time, and Manami confirmed they absolutely had. However, Sayuri apologized for the intrusion, prompting Rena to ask Shiki who the chicks were. Shiki introduced Manami and Sayuri as his classmates, but Manami was utterly shocked at the basic introduction because she had initially assumed they had created a bond deeper than her glory hole. Following that, Manami decided to activate her fangirling and started simping over Rena. She desperately asked for a handshake, and when Rena hesitantly gave her a handshake, Manami swore to never shower again. However, at that moment, Manami's mom arrived, shocking everyone. The hot MILF casually informed Manami that she received an extra income from work, so she was feeling loaded and would love to give everyone a treat. Shortly after, the squad found themselves at a restaurant, indulging in a grill feast. Even Rena, usually composed, couldn't stop gushing over how insanely delicious the beef was. Meanwhile, Shiki mentioned he had never tried grilled hanger steak before. The moment he took a bite, his entire world slowed down, and he transcended reality, unlocking the secrets of the beef multiverse. After having a great meal, the gang stepped out of the restaurant, and just as they were about to part ways, Manami rushed to meet Shiki, informing him that she wanted to ask him something. Wasting no time, Manami asked if he and Rena were dating, shocking Shiki, who instantly denied it. Feeling relieved, Manami leaned close to Shiki's ears and firmly stated that she wanted her turn for a date. She even cheekily added that they could spend the night together, causing Shiki to freak out. The following morning at school, Manami excitedly reminded Sayuri about the upcoming White Day tradition, a special occasion where people give gifts to their loved ones. Just then, as she spotted Shiki approaching the school entrance, she wasted no time rushing over at him, eagerly asking what his plans were for the day. In response, Shiki casually mentioned that he intended to return gifts to those he cared about. Meanwhile, the ungrateful brat Matsuo, from back then, was hiding behind the lockers, eavesdropping. So while heading to class, Matsu rushed to meet Shiki and asked for his help on how to apologize to Manami and Tsurugi for behaving like an insensitive jerk when Manami had given him chocolate for Valentine's. Matsu admitted that what he did was very wrong, and he regretted his trash behavior. Matsuo further added that he needed Shiki's advice if he should get a gift for Manami and Sayuri for White Day and then ask for an apology. Shiki advised that he do exactly as he had planned, but emphasized that after which he asked to remain friends with the girls. Shiki also advised Matsuo to focus his apology to Manami, who he truly offended, and once she forgave him, Sayuri would also automatically forgive him. Matsuo was delighted to hear such an IQ 500 idea, and then thanked Shiki for being the best bro. So when White Day arrived, Matsu didn't waste any time to apologize to Manami for the nasty stuff he said about her chocolate, and then gifted her a boxed onion pie to show his remorse. Manami received it with thanks, told him she had forgotten about the issue, and then proposed they remain pals. Matsu thanked her in tears, and when Sarui entered the class, Matsu also gave her a gift. Just then, Shiki gave everyone his gift for the White Day, which excited the girls, and then informed them that his grandmother had made the sweets. At home that evening, Shiki received a text from Matsu asking if he was free that Sunday so they could go smelt fishing to show his gratitude for his help. Shiki agreed, so on Sunday, Shiki linked up with Matsu in the icy fishing ground, and just as they were about to commence, they unexpectedly bumped into Manami, who explained that her dad loved fishing, so every year she and her family came for some fishing experience. Shiki then suggested Manami join them in fishing, to which she happily agreed. Matsu drilled a hole into the icy ground, wishing it was Manami instead, and together they all tried to catch some fish. However, after waiting for hours, they caught 0 fish, so Matsu excused himself, saying he wanted to go check on his dad. Just as he left, Manami told Shiki that it had been a while since they were alone together, and then suggested they watch a video together to pass the time. After watching a few makeup videos on YouTube, Manami confessed that she loved making people pretty, and her aim was to become a professional makeup artist. She further mentioned that she would love to study abroad and learn all she could about makeup from Kylie Jenner, but she felt it would only be a dream. However, Shiki encouraged her never to give up because he could see potential. At those words, Manami smiled and then asked Shiki the last time he actually waxed. Shiki nervously replied, saying he had no idea, so Manami demanded to know if he used any conditioner or moisturizer. With no response, Manami pulled out her lip balm and asked to apply it to Shiki's lips. Shiki tried to resist because using Manami's lip balm would mean they kissed indirectly. But Manami grabbed Shiki's legs firmly and was about to apply the lip balm on his crusty lips before Matsu decided to play devil's advocate by interrupting the steamy scene. Matsu informed them that his dad had caught a bunch of fish and then suggested they change spots. With that, the team was able to catch a bunch of fish, which they fried and enjoyed to no end. The next morning, Shiki caught a cold after being exposed to harsh weather conditions during fishing. His grandma, who had been taking care of him, walked into the room and handed him a water bottle wrapped with a note from Rena asking him to take care of himself and stay hydrated. When his granny left for the supermarket, Manami came to the house to take care of Shiki. To confirm if Shiki had a fever, Manami moved close to his face as though she was about to clap his lips, causing Shiki to feel tense. After confirming, she gave him minty candy to help with the fever and cold. Shiki thankfully collected it, and when he tasted the candy, he felt totally relieved. Manami felt it was all her fault Shiki had caught a cold. Feeling remorseful, Manami offered to do anything Shiki wanted. In the morning, Shiki woke up feeling relieved, so he texted Manami to thank her for giving him the magic candy that had helped boost his immune system. The following week, with summer fast approaching, Shiki, now in his second year of school, trekked toward campus. However, along the way, he spotted Manami standing by the roadside. The moment she clocked him approaching, she wasted no time grabbing his hand, cheerfully announcing that she had been waiting for him so they could head to school together. As they walked to school holding hands, Manami complained about how spring break went by in a flash and wished she had spent a lot of time with Shiki instead. Shiki quickly shifted the topic, stating that he hoped for the new session they get into the same class, to which Manami seconded that she hoped too. But then, Shiki observed that Manami seemed sad all of a sudden after making that statement. Manami wasted no time explaining that she heard a rumor that when classes were assigned in the school, the bird-brained students and the smart ones don't get placed in the same class. Manami added that if the assumption were true, she feared that they might not be in the same class. Manami went on to add that if they were put into different classes, they might not get to talk as much, and over time, they would make different friends. So because of that, she thought it was best to escort him to school while she still could. However, Shiki assured her that even if they got sent to a different class, he would always visit her. Upon arriving at school, they rushed to check the notice board and discovered that they had been placed in the same class, which made them overjoyed. Sayuri also arrived, and it turned out she also was in the same class with Shiki and Manami. While in class, the teacher, who looked AI-generated, welcomed the students to their new class and then announced that they would be selecting the class president and vice president. The teacher asked for volunteers and also explained that the students could nominate anyone they wished. Matsuo, who was also in the class, immediately raised his hand and nominated Shiki for president, shocking Shiki. Matsuo explained that Shiki was the best man for the job because he was super smart and responsible. Manami and Sayuri also raised their hands in agreement, so the teacher asked Shiki if he had any objection. After a brief pause, Shiki stated that as long as it involved helping the class, he didn't mind taking on the responsibility. With that, Shiki was picked as the new class president. Manami immediately raised her hand, insisting she was made the vice president. The teacher agreed, and she became Shiki's vice president. Later that evening at home, Shiki spent his entire life savings on a Nintendo handheld and, with Sayuri's help, dove into the world of multiplayer gaming. As they played, Sayuri suddenly sighed, admitting that while it felt like everyone around her was deepening their friendships, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stuck in place. However, Shiki assured her it wasn't so and then reminded her that when they had first met, she was isolated but had changed a lot since then. The next day at school, Shiki and Manami started their presidential duties and had to work into the night. While arranging sheets, Manami told Shiki that the reason she had agreed to be his vice was so she could spend enough time with him, making Shiki fluster in embarrassment. While walking home that night, Shiki couldn't help but notice that Manami seemed a little down. He wondered what could be bothering her. But before he could ask, Manami suddenly came to an abrupt stop. Turning to face him, she brought up the upcoming Golden Week and, with a serious expression, firmly asked Shiki to keep an entire day free just for her because she had something to tell him. On the Golden Month, Manami did her makeup like every other day, but this time with a little bit of extra. Meanwhile, Shiki, who was waiting for her in the train station, couldn't help but wonder what was that important thing Manami wanted to talk about. At that moment, he assumed maybe she wanted to confess her feelings to him, but brushed it off. Shortly afterward, Manami was finally dropped off by her mother at the station. Manami dashed inside the station looking like a glamour babe, and on meeting Shiki inside informed him that where she was taking him was pretty far. She also mentioned it would be a 3-hour drive, and they would be taking the train. Throughout the journey, Manami dozed off like a sloth, completely knocked out by the train's rhythmic motion. Watching her sleep, just like he had the first time he visited her house, Shiki found himself unconsciously whispering that she looked beautiful. To his horror, Manami stirred just in time to hear it. Panicking, Shiki scrambled to deny it, but in his attempt to explain, he ended up glitching like a lagging video game character. Once their train ride ended, they hopped on a bicycle and made their way to a nearby restaurant where they indulged in a delicious meal. Midway through lunch, Manami playfully teased Shiki, saying she loved the way he ate, which immediately sent a blush creeping up his face. Embarrassed, Shiki returned the compliment, praising how delicious her food choices were. After finishing their meal, they boarded a bus heading toward Manami's so-called secret place. Upon arriving, Manami wasted no time. She swiftly covered Shiki's eyes, heightening the suspense. When she finally led him forward and removed her hands, Shiki found himself standing before a breathtaking field of pink cherry blossoms. Shiki, completely amazed, confessed that he had never seen blossoms that beautiful before, which made Manami shout in excitement that her surprise was actually a big success. With that, they moved around the beautiful park filled with cherry blossoms and took several pics for the gram. They also, at that moment, met an old couple, and Manami suggested they take a picture together. Shiki and Manami had a fun time exploring the park, and when it was almost twilight, Shiki suggested they head back home. Seeing how pretty Manami was, Shiki took a pic of her, and when she asked that he send the pic to her on WhatsApp, Shiki was stunned to discover that she had changed her profile pic to the picture they had taken together earlier. Shiki complained that using the picture would make them look like a couple, but noticing Manami's silence, he kept shut and gave her a promise bracelet he had bought for her. Manami loved it and then asked that Shiki wear the promise bracelet on her wrist, which he did. Just after that, there was an awkward silence. Shiki tried breaking the silence, but he couldn't. After a brief moment, Manami finally mentioned that the important thing she wanted to tell Shiki was that she would be leaving, startling Shiki. Manami pointed out that she was going to study abroad to focus on her beauty training. Manami also mentioned that thanks to Shiki, she was able to take the bold step. Manami admitted that she used to be super lazy about her future, but seeing Shiki give his absolute best in everything he does, she felt motivated and decided to work harder on herself. However, mid-conversation, Shiki hugged her from nowhere, with tears in his eyes. Shiki was about to say something before a guard of the park approached, informing them that the park was about to close. Panicking, Manami suggested they hurry so they could catch the bus back home, but the guard told them that the final bus had already left. Stranded, Shiki called his dad for help, but his dad suggested they spend the night at a hotel. At the hotel, Manami reminded Shiki about spending the night together she had promised him, turning Shiki's face red immediately. Since they hadn't had dinner, they decided to eat a delicious-looking meal in the hotel. after which they headed back to the room, but Shiki thought about how he would spend the night with Manami alone. Snapping him out of thinking, Manami asked if she could take a shower, causing Shiki to freeze in shock. As Manami showered in the bathroom, the useless virgin was having a seizure just from having cultured thoughts. But he tried to calm himself by putting on the TV, and eventually he drifted off to slumberland while thinking if he would ever see Manami again when she eventually traveled. When Manami was done showering, she found Shiki sleeping, so she dropped a note for him and left. Meanwhile, Sayuri was worried that Shiki didn't log into their multiplayer game all through the weekend and didn't even reply to her text. Days later, Manami bumped into Sayuri in the cafeteria and informed her that she was leaving for the airport. So just as Manami left with her mom, Sayuri texted Shiki that Manami just left for the airport and asked if he wasn't going to say his final goodbyes to her. At that moment, Shiki stared at the note Manami had left for him back in the hotel, and just then, memories of Manami flooded his mind. Determined to see Manami before she was gone, Shiki begged his dad to take him to the airport. Meanwhile, at the airport, Manami stared at her phone, hoping Shiki would at least call to say goodbye. But when her flight was announced, she gave up on Shiki's ever calling and was about to head to the departure gate. But at that moment, Shiki rushed to her and grabbed her hands. He gave her the hairpin she had left inside the note and told her it didn't matter how long she took, a year, 2 years, or even more. He would always be waiting for her. But Manami clarified that she was just going away for 2 weeks because it was just a short program, causing Shiki to break down in embarrassment. However, Manami mentioned that 2 weeks was a long time for her since she had never left the village before, but assured Shiki she would return a mature lady. Will Manami admit her feelings for Shiki and confess when she returns? Comment 4 in love if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you want another recap like this, we suggest you watch this video right here.